The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, that was poor old Andrew Little, wasn't it? Who's achieved only one thing in 2016, and that is make David Cunliffe look popular and confident. That is it for 2016. Mr Speaker, they don't call him Angry Andrew for nothing, but not without good reason, because half of his caucus want to leave and the other half of the caucus want him to leave. Mr Speaker, you can't say that he doesn't have a vision like all of the great left-wing leaders around the world. I mean, just take a look at it, Mr Speaker. Bernie Sanders wants to rid the world of poverty. Jeremy Corbyn, he wants to rid the world of conflict. And Andrew Little, he wants to rid the phone book of Chinese-sounding surnames, Mr Speaker. And he's got a vision for all of those Chinese and Indian chefs. He wants them to be called Bruce or Trevor. That's his idea of a Chinese chef, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, yet again, another great budget from Bill English. The man is a maestro, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, Budget 2016 paints a picture of positivity and success for New Zealand and our economy. Let's just take a bit of a look at some of those numbers because they are sparkling, Mr Speaker. 3% growth for the next 5 years, stronger than almost any of our counterpart countries. Mr Speaker, 170,000 new jobs over the next 3 to 4 years on top of the 200,000 we created in the last 3 years, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, under this government, average wages have gone up $11,000. $11,000 a year. That is $211 per week for the average New Zealander. They're going to go up another $5,000 over this budget period, which will mean the average New Zealander earning $307 per week in their pocket under a National-led government, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we do know that Labor know how to tax and they know how to spend. Well, a National-led government knows how to get expenses under control. They were 34% of GDP. They're now under 30% of GDP, Mr Speaker, and debt on track to be 20% of GDP by 2020. Go and have a look around the world. Japan, government debt at 220% of GDP. The United States, the better part of 90%. The United Kingdom, 80 or 90%. Australia, with deficits as far as the eye can see. Mr Speaker, Bill English has got this country on the right track and under control, and debt under control as well. And let's look at the facts, Mr Speaker. This is an economy that is attracting more people, attracting more investment, attracting more international students, attracting more visitors. Mr Speaker, this is a place where interest rates are low and where inflation is low. And when it comes to older New Zealanders, this is a government that cares and delivers. How do I know that? How do I know that, Mr Peters? Well, under National and this government, New Zealand super's gone up 34% in the time we've been here. 34%. 34%, the average married couple, $250 a fortnight better off under a National-led government. Mr Speaker, I sometimes listen to Mr Little, and I accept when I made a comment to Jerry Brownlee before about Andrew Little's speech, he said, "You, mate, are the only one that's listening." But I listen to it and I hear this doe-eyed kind of history lesson which is so out of touch with reality. Here's what happened when National came into government. Deficits as far as the eye could see. It wasn't a health system that was delivering for New Zealand. It was a disgrace, Mr Speaker. Cancer sufferers in this country didn't get help. They got a boarding pass for Australia. That's what happened under a Labor government, Mr Speaker. 35,000 New Zealanders a year before we came into office said, "I've got a good idea. It's called living in Australia under a National-led government." Mr. Speaker, the education system under those people didn't even bother to tell parents whether their kids could read or write, Mr. Speaker. It was a country where core interest rates were 4 times faster. Mr. Speaker, wages were going up, all right, so was inflation. Real wages were going backwards, Mr. Speaker, and in the last 5 years, they increased government spending by 50%. Our economy was hopelessly ill-equipped to cope. So, Mr. Speaker, let's have a look at the position today. 8 years on, what is the situation across our economy? Well, it's prosperous and productive. And this is where expansion is taking place. Horticulture, viticulture, ICT, export education, tourism, beef, lamb, honey, manufacturing, high-tech. Here's a clue about how the New Zealand economy is going. There are now more Australians coming to live in New Zealand than New Zealanders going to Australia, and the #1 selling white wine in Australia is a Kiwi Sauvignon Blanc. Mr. Speaker, it's a takeover. It's a takeover. Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment to reflect on the strong and stable government we've provided for the last 8 years with our partners. Can I thank the ACT Party, United Future and the Māori Party for their strong and sensible support of the government, their input, their ideas, and for ensuring that the New Zealand public each day knows this country is going to run well and efficiently. Mr. Speaker, let's go and have a look at some of the specifics in this budget, because there's some real gems there. A whopping $2.2 billion in health. Now let's just take a step down memory lane. This government, this national-led government, one of the very first things we did is said, we're standing behind the women of New Zealand. We funded Herceptin, Mr. Speaker, and as a result of that, 1,704 women have been granted Herceptin. So it's no surprise in Budget 2016, there's $124 million more for Pharmac, Mr. Speaker. There is funding for drugs for melanoma like Opdivo. There's a Hep C drug which will help 50,000 sufferers of Hep C with a 90 to 100% success rate. But most of all, Mr. Speaker, a $39 million investment in a national bowel screening program where 700,000 New Zealanders will every 2 years get early detection. That's what a strong economy delivers. It saves lives for New Zealanders in issues that really matter. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that's delivered in elective surgery more each and every year. We know it's not just about spending more money, it's doing things better and more wisely. But in this budget, another $96 million for more hips and more knees. I remember when I came into Parliament in 2002, half the people that came to my electorate office couldn't even get on a waiting list for a hip or a knee operation. Now, Mr. Speaker, they get that treatment. And for those that are disabled in our community and our society, $169 million. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the plight of less well-off New Zealand children and what's happening to them and the support they're getting. Because I heard all that nonsense about Housing New Zealand before from Andrew Little. Well, here's the facts. When we took over, the State House New Zealand stock, the Housing New Zealand stock, was dilapidated and it was run down. This government has spent $2.2 billion fixing it up and building more homes. And before they get a bit too doe-eyed about what they did on Housing New Zealand, in the single biggest year under the last Labor government of building or fixing state houses, they spent $550 million. Budget 2016 will see $1 billion spent in Housing New Zealand, Mr. Speaker. So, Andrew Little's woken up that maybe people need to live in dry, insulated homes. Well, hello and welcome to the 21st century. Under this national-led government, already 290,000 homes have been insulated, 30,000 Housing New Zealand homes. Budget 2016 sees a further 20,000 rental properties for the lowest income New Zealanders will be insulated. Our residential tenancy bill, Mr. Speaker, will see 180,000 further homes insulated. You add all that up, 520,000 homes insulated under this national-led government. And what do the doe-eyed boys over there deliver? 50,000, actually less than 50,000, 10 times more insulation under a national-led government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's right that the government should support the most vulnerable in our community. But it's this national-led government that in the worst of times, when people are standing up saying cut benefits, cut entitlements, we said no. We stood behind the most vulnerable New Zealanders. We maintained working for families. We maintained entitlements. We maintained benefits. And guess what? This year, for the first time in 43 years, a national-led government raised benefits for New Zealanders, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, $652 million worth of social investment, $200 million for child, youth and family for the most at-risk youngsters, tens of millions of dollars to support young parents and young families, drug and alcohol programs for young pregnant mums. Mr. Speaker, $41 million for emergency housing, more money being spent in these areas than ever before, Mr. Speaker. So let's turn to housing just for a moment, because once again, what we heard from Andrew Little was some sort of dream world. Okay, under a Labor government, this is how many houses were built in Auckland a day. 10. 10. Apparently they're going to house everyone, but their track record is 10. Well, we deliver 40 a day to every hour in Auckland if the builders work 24 hours around the clock. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the metropolitan urban limit choked off demand, so 154 special housing areas, allowing 56,000 extra houses to be developed. What happened when National announced that? Phil Twyford got out there, thought he was in an election campaign, and put up a whole lot of billboards saying, what a terrible thing. And then 2 weeks ago, sorry about that, changed my mind, got that one wrong, Mr. Speaker. Same thing when it comes to surplus Crown land. It stayed surplus under them, under us, more money in this budget. Mr. Speaker, very soon the government will release the national policy statement on urban development. Mr. Speaker, as New Zealand grows faster, one thing maybe we can agree on is that there is an emerging consensus that land supply issues haven't kept up with all of the demand and must be addressed. So let me make this crystal clear, because this is what the national policy statement will do when it's released over the next few years. It will ensure that councils must make available sufficient land to accommodate growth in the communities. It's no longer a matter of choice or debate for those councils. Land will be zoned residential and developed in quantities sufficient to meet demand, period. And that is the same when it comes to industrial land, Mr. Speaker. And let's see who stands up and votes for that if it requires legislation ultimately in the House. Mr. Speaker, in order to live like a first world economy, one needs to earn like a first world economy. And that's why under Bill English and Stephen Joyce, you're now seeing this massive investment in a smarter, more high-tech economy, $761 million to allow us to compete and be more productive. This is a government that's put science at the heart of its thinking and put science at the heart of the economy. If we want to make sure that we move away from those commodity markets, but if we want to address the big issues, the climate change, the environment, the protection of our native species, all of these things require more money on science and innovation. Budget 2016 has hundreds of millions of dollars dedicated in this area, in tertiary education and more apprenticeships, in a range of different research projects. Mr. Speaker, this will make New Zealand a smarter, better equipped economy to compete in the first world. And Mr. Speaker, it will also make it easier for our smaller businesses, our SMEs, who at the moment have to basically pay their provisional tax of a very antiquated system, which is one of guesswork, which they can never hope to get right. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the $187 million investments, tens of thousands of small businesses will no longer have to worry about that aspect. They'll just have to get out there and make their business successful. Mr. Speaker, Tourism is going better than ever, I say. Now, there was a time, Mr. Speaker, when the Labor Party used to mock the cycleways. Mock them. Mr. Speaker, mind you, there was a time they used to mock the Hobbits and then they went off to the premiere and they liked the movie. But, Mr. Speaker, there was a time they used to mock the cycleways. 2015, here's a number that's worth remembering. 1 million people went on the cycleways in 2015, so 25 million more there. Mr. Speaker, education, it's the heart of a decent society. That's why we've got national standards. That's why we've wired up every school for ultra-fast broadband. That's why we have higher expectations for kids getting NCEA level 2 above, or for having every child in ECE. $883 million in this budget, 9 new schools, 480 classrooms, more help for the most vulnerable. You see, when we get up and say those poor kids actually deserve a bit more support, Labor don't like it. So they get up the whole time and say, give money to poor families, and national-led government delivers just that, more money for poor families, and they don't like it. Mr. Speaker, where are their priorities? Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to invest in keeping our communities safe, because it's the expectation of every New Zealander they will be safe, and the responsibility of the government to do that. More money for our intelligence services, better tools for cyber security, more money for those brave men and women in the New Zealand Police Force, better programs for drug and alcohol and all the different things we're doing, investing in the latest GPS, Mr. Speaker, for high-risk investors. So, Mr. Speaker, it's offenders, not investors, offenders, but I won't invest in those as well. Mr. Speaker, the number 8 is lucky in Chinese, is it not? The number 8 is lucky. Bill English's 8th budget will be successful for our country, but not because of 8 and not because of luck, Mr. Speaker, because of good management and good choices. You see, Mr. Speaker, while the opposition are lost in a fog of negativity, Bill English shines a light on prosperity and opportunity. Mr. Speaker, while the opposition seek to close off new markets and ban those who were not born here from investing or immigrating to our country, Bill English seeks to make it easier for New Zealand companies, large and small, to compete and win on the world stage. And, Mr. Speaker, while the opposition demonstrates a complete lack of faith in New Zealanders, their abilities and their drive to want to succeed and get ahead without the support of the government, it's Bill English that empowers them to make the most of their lives, to back themselves and their families, and to understand the most basic principle in life, that there is no substitute for hard work and determination. Mr. Speaker, this country, New Zealand, it has a brighter future, and for the very large part, we have the maestro, Bill English, to thank for that.
Order.